Hi everyone, I'm super excited to be here at this PnP Virtual Conference, doing it from my home today. Hopefully we can meet in person going forward and having this session in person. But this session for the PnP Virtual Conference, this first of a kind, hopefully we will see more, is all about the Microsoft Teams Apps Generator YoTeams. So we will get starting on how to use the YoTeams generator to scaffold projects and build projects and deploy them and to create stellar applications for your Microsoft Teams apps environments and for your clients and for yourself. My name is Wictor. I work for Avanade as a global innovation lead for Modern Workplace. Been there for 6 years, but have a long background in SharePoint development, but has found Microsoft Teams apps development a real passion of mine. I've been awarded the Microsoft MVP award 11 times, but also now recently been awarded the Microsoft Regional Director, something I'm super proud of. You can find more information about me and my postings at www.victorwilén.sc, but most importantly, you will find most of my communication being via Twitter at Wictor. So, what's this session all about? First of all, we're going to cover sort of what is YoTeams and why you should use it. We will go through how to scaffold out a project and what capabilities are in there when you do that, and how the source code looks like, and also how you build and deploy this. But first, sort of what is YoTeams and why should I care? So the YoTeams were originally created in 2017, just after Teams was announced, because I needed a way to scaffold out my projects much faster. And currently, and it's still the most comprehensive Teams app solution generator out there. The Microsoft Teams announced their Microsoft Teams toolkit at Build a couple of months ago, which also is a great alternative for building Teams applications, and more specifically if you're more into a wizard-like experience as we used to with Visual Studio, and also if you prefer to use JavaScript over TypeScript, that's the way to go. But YoTeams combines sort of the power of the open source community and all the different kind of solutions and packages, etc. we can get there, and Microsoft Teams to very fast and create a full-featured Microsoft Teams app, and using all the different extensibility points in Microsoft Teams. It uses a similar approach as SharePoint Framework with npm and sort of how the commands and Gulp and tasks, etc. works, and also it's a continuously evolving solution where we add more features as soon as Microsoft Teams adds more features to its capabilities. So before getting started, you need to prepare your machine with a couple of things. They're very similar. The steps are very similar to how you do with SharePoint Framework and other node-based projects. We require you to have Node.js version 12 or later. I'd recommend that you take a look at the NVM if you want to switch back and forth between different versions, specifically if you're working with SharePoint Framework that has other sort of requirements in all the versions. The second thing, you need to install a couple of packages. So you run npm install yo, then Gulp CLI and TypeScript, and preferably install them globally. So yo is the YoTeams generator, the Yeoman generator, not the YoTeams. The Gulp CLI is the command line interface for Gulp, and then we want TypeScript as well. Then you finally install Generator Teams, which is the Teams Yeoman generator plugin. And if you are living on the edge, you can actually install the preview, and then you just append at preview after Generator Teams to install that one. And once you've done that, you're all set. Just open up command prompt and start typing YoTeams to start scaffolding out your project. So you type YoTeams, and then you essentially follow the instructions while creating creating a scaffolding out the project. It's a very wizard-like interface, even though it's in a command prompt. And based on how you configure your application, you will get follow-up questions, so we can scaffold out the project as you prefer with the different kind of artifacts. There are a couple of options you can use. First of all, you can use skip install if you want to run something, some package manager such as Yarn or anything like that. And it's also faster scaffolding a project if you don't run npm install. So skip install can make your scaffolding faster if you just want to inspect the files. Another thing, if you don't want to be part of the telemetry, you can pass in no telemetry, and then the Yeoman teams will not send telemetry data to to us. The telemetry data is of course important because that sort of decides on what kind of areas we need to invest in making the solution better. But also it sends, if there's any exceptions or errors or anything, it gets sent to us so we can understand that and fix that for future releases. But of course, if you want to not share the data, of course, I need to say it doesn't send anything data about your project, only which pieces you use in there. For instance, if you're scaffolding out a tab or a bot or etc. But no details on your actual project. So don't be scared about that. Enough PowerPoint slides. Let's get into it. Let's see how we can scaffold an app with Yo Teams. So in order to do that, I switch over to my command prompt. I already created a directory in here, and I used the new Windows terminal to do all this, but I installed, I have npm installed, I have Yo Teams generator, Yo, and everything that I need. In order to get started, I type Yo Teams. Once I do that, first time you run it may take a couple of seconds. But once I do that, that will load the generator and will ask me for my solution name. So first of all, we can actually see here the version I'm using is 2.16.preview, and the latest general available one or production version is 2.15. But as I said, if you want to live on the edge, go with the preview versions. So my solution name, that is concluded from the directory name that I currently have. So I'll just accept that by clicking enter. Now I want to stay in this current folder, so I click enter once again. Then I need to add the title of Microsoft Teams project. And this is the title that you will see in the App Store of your Teams tenant. So let's just leave it as PnP demo. Then I need to insert my company. That should be preferably, of course, your company, but I use my name in here. That will also be part of the application. When the user click install, they will see the developer's name or the company name. Then I have the option of choosing the manifest. The manifest is the instruction set to Microsoft Teams, what kind of features and functions are available. I'd highly recommend that you use the latest version, so 1.7 in this case, which contains some new updates compared to 1.6. We typically in the Yo Teams generator, we support the latest version and the latest version -1. There might be some reasons you want to stick with the v1.6. I'd recommend using v1.7. Another feature we have that you can actually run if you already scaffold out the project using, for instance, Yo Teams generator 2.14. You can run this command again and upgrade your version, and we'll take care of upgrading the different files that's required to go to that version you specify. There are also the opportunity for you to use the dev preview, which is sort of the beta version of the manifest and the features in Microsoft Teams. If you know what you're doing, then this is an option for you to choose as well. But for this demo, let's choose 1.7 and I click enter. Then there's an opportunity for you, if you are a Microsoft partner, you can insert your partner ID in here, and that will sort of send some kind of telemetry data to Microsoft on which partner builds apps, etc. I don't know exactly how that works, but I think it's a good idea to have your partner ID in there if you have a partner ID, that is, or unless you're building sort of test projects and whatnot. But if you're building things for clients or for the store, it's good to have your partner ID in there. Then the most important selection comes, and this is where we choose what features do we want in our project. That's also all these kind of questions are dependent on each other. So depending on what feature or the version I chose, this selection might change. And in here I can go up and down and with the space choose what I want to do. So let's I can unselect and I can select. So let's use a tab and a bot. I can choose all of them if I want to, or just one of them. I can also run Yo Teams again over an existing project to add additional tabs or additional message extensions, etc., etc. So I click enter once I'm done. Then the second thing I will ask for, where do you want to host this? And it automatically creates an URL for you. In this case, PnP Virtual Conference demo, azurewebsites.net. You might have your contoso.com domain or whatever you want in here. For this demo, you can choose enter. This can be changed afterwards. Most of these settings are actually stored in a specific configuration or environment file that I will show you. Here's something that came in schema 1.5, if I'm not mistaken. Would you like to show a loading indicator when your app or tab loads? So you can choose yes or no, and that's specifically important if you have sort of single sign-on tabs. It will take a second or two before you have the token, so you don't have to create your own loading screen. So essentially you can have Teams generating that loading screen for you. So let's choose yes in this case. This is a new feature introduced in 2.16. If you want personal tabs to be rendered without the tab header, I'll choose no, which is the default one here for this demo. Another great feature we have is that we actually include a test framework in initial test for your application. So assuming you're building out an real enterprise application, you of course want to have testing in there. So we can opt in to have those tests by clicking yes. I choose no for this demo. We also have support for application insights if you want to do that. So let's choose no, we don't need that for this demo. And then we actually come into the different kind of features that's actually dependent on the feature selection I chose above. So first of all, I have a tab. What should the name of my tab be? So we call it PnP tab. And then what kind of tab do I want to create? Do I want to do it configurable or static or personal? The configurable ones are those who exist in channels. So you can add a channel tab. And the personal ones are those that are personal for you. For instance, if you want to create a personal dashboard. So that is up to how you want to build your application. I choose a configurable one for now. The next thing, since I choose a configurable one, so where do I want this to appear? So I have two options, essentially in a team or in a team channel and or in a group chat, which is a great feature where we actually can have tabs in group chat as well. So I can choose both one or of them. So let's choose in a group chat and in a team. Then we have a feature also introducing 1.5 if you want a single sign-on support. That requires some extra setup. Documentation for that is all available on the YoTeams Wiki, so you can find all the details of that if you want to. There's also some restrictions about that if you're using the Azure Web Sites domain that you need to read in the official documentation. For this demo, let's not do any single sign-on. Another feature here, do I want this tab, since it's a tab, right? We can actually have that the option of using this tab as a web part in Microsoft SharePoint online as well. So I can choose yes for that one, but let's opt out and say no. So that was all the tab questions. Now, since I chose a bot as well, I can choose between, if I already built a bot, I can just point to that bot already, or I can add a new bot framework bot to my project. So let's choose that one. And then I need, of course, to provide a name for the bot. Let's accept it as it is. And of course, if you're building a bot, you need to go into the bot framework portal or Azure portal to register that bot channel registration. That's where you get this ID for the bot. For now, I will do that later if required. So I click enter here. This GUID can be changed and modified later. And then I also have the option of adding a static tab to the bot. So let's click yes on that one. And that tab needs to have a name. So let's call it FAQ. And also, it will also ask me for file support. If I want file support in this bot, I choose no for now. And once that is done, all my files start being generated. And these are all being created locally. And after those files have been created, we will start installing the packages. This is something you can control with the skip install argument. So if you don't want to see all the packages going through, then you just run skip install, and then you have to manually do npm install or npm or yarn or whatever kind of package you manage you prefer. This will take a couple of minutes depending on how much caching you have. So we have the luxury of having this recorded, so we can fast forward from here. And there we are. Now we have a fully scaffolded solution with all the different files, packages, etc., where we can start working with that code and deploy it and build it, etc. And let's start up the Microsoft Visual Studio Code to take a look at the code. But before that, let's dig into some of the nuts and bolts of the actual solution and see how it's scaffolded out. Before we actually dig in deeper into the actual code, let's take a look at the anatomy of the scaffolded application. So I think this is a good overview that shows you the moving parts within the application and how, of course, you can modify it and work with it. So the solution is created as a VsCode solution, and that is essentially we're creating a set of folders, the source code, the project files, etc. And first of all, it creates some client-side code. All this is React code. We're using the Fluent UI React North Star as the design UX framework. We also use the Teams.js SDK for the Teams interaction. And this is all TypeScript, HTML, CSS, SAS, etc. And NPM components for the client side. So this will create a JavaScript file for you running sort of the client side things in a tab, for instance, and configuration for message extensions and task modules and whatnot. We also generate the server-side component. As I said, there are many scenarios where we want to use server-side components and that where we are required to use server-side components, such for bots. So we use Microsoft Bot Builder. 4.8 in this current release, 4.9 is coming in upcoming releases, but of course this is all open, so you can just replace it with whatever version you prefer. We're also using the Node Express as the web server, which has a lot of plugins if you want to add features such as Azure AD sign-in, logging, telemetry, and whatnot. And then we have a specific components called Express MS Teams Host, which makes it easier for you to essentially create a bot class and have that connected to the Express server and that interface by using declarative approach on the classes in TypeScript using attributes. And those attributes are used across the different kind of tabs, bots, messaging extensions, etc., etc. And also this side is TypeScript as well. It's running Node. So the good thing is if you're using a more advanced data model, both the client side and server side can reuse the same kind of TypeScript components or definitions, I would say. We also create the Teams apps manifest, which is a manifest file declared in JSON, which contains pointers to all the different kind of tabs, the bots, connectors, etc. This is a JSON file that contains replaceable parameters. Depending on what kind of environment you're building it for, you can replace those values such as application ID, the URLs, if you want to have a test bot or not, etc. And also we of course have the two logos, the color and the outline logos in there. And finally, there's of course the sort of build artifacts you need for this, which is Webpack to packaging the JavaScript files together, bundling them, and optimizing them. But also Gulp to do the task things, and the .env files, which are the environmental files where you have your sort of replaceable parameters used in both the client side, server side, but also in the manifest.json. So let's jump on over to the code and take a look at it and see these kind of different pieces and how they're laid out in the scaffolded directory. So here we are in VsCode. This is a scaffolded project just after running Yo Teams. So first of all, you can see we have the package JSON file here with all the different node packages being used. We have a README file with some getting started instructions. And also depending on what kind of artifacts you scaffold, you will have one or more README files. So here's one specific for the bot and how to set that up. We have the tsconfig files, and we actually have two of them, one for the server side and one for the client side. We have the Gulp file and configuration files for that one, but most importantly, here in the root, we have the .env file. And this .env file contains sort of the host name you need for the application. If you want to change that one, it contains your specific application ID, the name of the package, remember the bot we created. We have the bot ID here, so here's where I go and paste my real bot ID once I registered in Azure portal. There's some other things in here that we haven't configured for this application, but I'd recommend you take a look at these ngrok settings, which are, if you're building sort of specifically around bots, if you're building bots, you can use ngrok to publish your local host to be available on internet using a real domain name. So that is what I prefer to use here, to essentially enter your subdomain here, and also during runtime that will actually replace the host name when you're doing ngrok or using ngrok to build your stuff. Then we have all the source code under source here. There's two folders, the app and the manifest, and let's start with manifest, and that's where your sort of Teams application are. The Teams application is fairly thin. It's essentially this JSON file with pointers to the different kind of endpoints. So if we take a look at this one, it is dynamically generated based on your settings, and you can also see we have these replaceable parameters in here, replacing from the .env file, application ID, the versions, package names. Here's our tab we created. You can see here we replace the host name, and then we scroll further down. We have the static tab, which for our bot, the FAQ page we made there, and then finally sort of the bot where we replace the bot ID as well. So this is something the Yo Teams generator takes care of creating and updating if you run it more times, as I mentioned before, but also you can go in here and modify and fix stuff as well. We have the two icons, the color icon and the outline icon. You can of course replace them. In the app folder, we have a set of folders and components. First of all, we have the server.ts. This is something that's generated for you, and that is sort of the setup of the Express server, and it dynamically load in all the bots, tabs, etc. that is required for this. If you want to add more stuff to your Express server, this is where you go in and modify and add more components or APIs or authorization, authentication, if you want those kind of things. Then we have a set of folders here depending on your setup. Web and scripts will always be there. The web is sort of the web components where we have the HTML pages and CSS. So for instance, we need an index page, we need the privacy in terms of use pages, we have them in there. All of these are essentially just web pages like this. So you can go in and modify and do whatever you want in there. And also, since it's Express, you can use server-side rendering if you want to, and switch out for Jade or other kind of templating mechanisms. Under scripts, that is where we have all the client-side scripts. So in this case, we created a tab and a bot, and the bot had a FAQ page. So if we take a look at the tab, we have three components in here. We have the actual tab, we have the configuration page, and the remove page. And those are all React components using the Fluent UI React North Star. And this is how we scaffold out, and this is how we set up the page and the tab. We register the theme handlers so we can switch back and forth between the themes. We initialize the application, and also then finally renders out the application here. The same kind of thing for our FAQ page for our bot. We got a page that looks fairly similar to this one, but where you can go in and modify the contents of your actual FAQ page. So that's what scripts do. Under the other two folders here are one for the tab, and for the tab it's fairly simple since tabs are predominantly client-side. The only thing we do there is add an attribute to this PnP tab class, which makes sure that these pages cannot be iframed unless you're in the Teams environment. So within Teams, yes, it can be iframed, but you can't iframe it into a custom application. If you still want to do that, you just remove these attributes. For the bot, which is more advanced, this is where we scaffold out the bot that inherits from the Teams activity handler. So this is where you can go in and modify how your bot will work and sort of the dialogue for that bot. So that's essentially how the application looks like. It's fairly simple, where you find all the files under source. And so once we start building this, it will create two new folders, one called package and one called dist. The package is where your manifest will be with the all the parameters replaced, and that's what you upload to Microsoft Teams. And in the dist folder is where your deployment files are, or the runtime files which you might deploy to Azure or wherever you want to host this. So let's finish this and see how we get from our code to building our package to deploying it and running our solution. To do this, we do have 4 main tasks to do that. So Gulp build, we just build the solution so you can verify your server-side and client-side code works. Gulp manifest will create the actual package. Gulp-serve will build and create the manifest and everything, but start everything on local host if you want to test out your web, sort of the tab, etc., without hosting it in Microsoft Teams. As I mentioned, ngrok is super important if you want to deploy things or test things in Microsoft Teams with bots, etc. So therefore we have a specific command called Gulp ngrok-serve, which will spin up ngrok and with that configuration. And if you don't have an ngrok paid subscription, it will automatically create a random domain name for you, and you can upload that application to Microsoft Teams. You can also specify using --env multiple environment files. So for instance, if you have one for production, staging, development, etc. So let's serve this up and see how it looks like in practice. To build, deploy, and run our application, we need to run Gulp ngrok-serve, to use ngrok to host our application and publish it on the public internet. It will take you a few seconds, up to a minute, the first time you run this one. But as you can see, we start ngrok first, and we package the manifest. We will start building solution and everything. And what I need to do is I need to copy this one right here and go into my bot registration, update my bot here to point that one since it's random generated, and then click save. So we can test our bot within a few seconds in Microsoft Teams and wait for the build to finish. So once the application has finished and it's up and running, you can see the server is running on port 3007 here. It's published on the public internet using ngrok. We go over to Microsoft Teams. We go into the team and the channel here, and we sideload the application by uploading a custom app. We navigate to the folder we have for a project to package, and the zip file here is what we upload. Once we upload that one, you will see all the information about your application. You can click add, and we will have the application in our Teams sideloaded in there. You can of course upload it to the App Store also, in the local App Store if you want to. Now we can see in the general channel we get the bot posting the hello message essentially. We can go in to tabs here, click on add. We will find our tab in the listing, and it's actually called PnP demo. That's what we call it. Click on that one. Get to the configuration dialog first, where I can enter random values. So this is just a sample. Click save, and we will have our tab visible inside our Teams. That is it, folks. Now you know how to install, create, scaffold, build, deploy a Microsoft Teams app using the Teams generator. And I think this is the interesting point here. It is extremely complete and comprehensive solution for building Microsoft Teams apps. It is fully open source. It's driven by the PnP community, so all contributions are welcome. You will find some tutorials and more demos at aka.ms/yoteams. If you want to read more on Teams development and understanding sort of the manifest, go to akms/teamsdev. And then of course we have a great series of 5-minute videos on the PnP YouTube channels. You can go there and check out more videos. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you learned something new today. And of course we're looking for your feedback so we can do this more often. So go in there and rate it high or low. Depending on how you feel, give us feedback and tell us what you want to see more in the next PnP Virtual Conference. Thank you. Yo Teams.